So, hello everyone, I'm Sebastian Wrubel and we are the FreightTech.org YouTube channel. Today I have a special guest, Kevin Kreuthoff from Root Scanner. Yeah, I can see you're smiling, so I didn't say that wrong.
Correct.
Hi Kevin, how are you?
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Sebastian. Very good. Yourself?
Very well. Sun is shining. We are recording it the day where the ILA strikes are hitting the East Coast, so let's see how the week develops. But yeah, so far so good. And Kevin, I think it's great to have you on board on the show. It's unbelievable how great things you have done within the root scanner over the last couple of years. I remember early days, but let not me telling your story. So maybe you can tell us, what's behind the root scanner and how all of this venture was, inspired to be launched, and maybe your story as well because you've been over there for the very early days, as far I know.
Yeah. No, that's correct. Yeah. So myself, I've been involved with Root Scanner from the start. Created the initial prototype that has led to what is now the engine behind the Root Scanner platform. And ever since, I've been responsible for all the technical developments that we do on the product side, and as well as on the R&D and on the data side, so data quality, data science, data management, those kinds of things. And that part of the team that actually does that work. Also since the beginning of the January this year, also ad interim taking on the managing director role for RootScanner as a whole.
Congrats on that.
Um, yeah, and that's um, uh, my uh, role at RootScan at the moment. Um, yeah, so the way RootScanner started out from within Port of Rotterdam. So the Port of Rotterdam Authority, um, at a moment in time, I think 5 or 6 years ago, they had a lot of requests coming in from their users of the port, requesting for insights regarding container schedule connectivity of the port. So the Port of Rotterdam at that time decided, we want a enhanced visibility on this, and supply our community with insights. So they set out and created a tool specifically for Port of Rotterdam, which was called Navigate at that time, and it showed all the connections to, from, and via the port. At that time, I was in another department, in the innovation department, and there came a time at which the routing optimization was an issue, and then I somehow via got involved, and said, hey, well, I have some ideas. I was working on a different topic at that time, which was more related to ETA prediction, but it also has to do with networks and graphs and times and locations. So I had
Yeah, if
some
you want to
initial
if you want
ideas.
to if you want to count the prediction of ETA, you need to know what the ETA is, yeah, and what was at the very beginning. So it
Yeah,
is connected.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So at that time I had some suggestions like, hey, maybe we can try this out. So they said, okay, mm, can you get some proof that it might actually work? So we set out and got some time to create a prototype, which was presented, um, which seemed promising at that time. And they said, well, okay, let's go ahead and start, and see if we can come up with like an MVP for the routing engine. So at that time, we started with some developers. So two backend developers, one front-end developer, and myself. And we got 3 months to sort of prove that we could get a minimal viable product engine to supply the tool at that time,
Mhm.
which succeeded because we're here now. So
It's good you
that was,
succeeded.
yeah, exactly, yeah. And and ever since we've been building upon that routing engine, so continuously improving it, building it up from the start again. continuously moving forward. And the application itself, what it does is it combines the schedules from deep sea, short sea, ro-ro, barge, rail operators in one big network of potential solutions with a lot of business rules, which connections are feasible and which are not, and then allows the user to interact with them and find the best combination from door to door. So that was really the aim on bringing that transparency basically and bringing that insight. And when we were doing so, we got a lot of response from the user community saying, well, hey, this is very interesting to see all these routes via Rotterdam, but hey, I'm in a location in which, well, sometimes Hamburg might be a better solution for me, or Bremerhaven, or Antwerp. Can't you make a neutral comparison between those ports as well? That was quite
Yeah, that was a
like
challenging question, right? It's like, it's like asking the company that is, oh, but by the way, you have a nice tool, but maybe let's do the same for different ports in our
exactly.
competition.
Yeah, yeah. So that was quite a strategic decision for the board, as of course the owner of the solution. Yeah, it can be that other ports are better on some connections. Do you still want to move forward with this? I mean, there is the
Yeah.
opportunity. We see a big need, a big well, yeah, need for transparency, but also for this, additional services and insights. Um, and at that time, the conviction was, okay, well, in the end, this is going to happen. This is going to be created, and we'd rather be part of it than have it sort of, happen to us. So at that time, we gotta go. That was like in January 2021. Um, and that was the start of Root Scanner as a neutral proposition. And the first year was really focusing on getting data. All right, so
Yeah,
a
I can
routing
imagine.
optimization without schedules in there to optimize upon is worthless, right? So it's a bit of a chicken egg situation in which, well, you would like users, so the operators and carriers are willing to share their data, but the other way around, if there's no data from the carriers and inland operators, the users don't see any use and they don't use it. So we really had to, convince them on the value of this transparency and being found on a neutral platform. So that was a big challenge in the first year. So that was really focusing on 2021. We were really focusing on, can we get parties to join and participate in this idea that we have for this neutral proposition. So yeah, well, at the end of the year, we had I think around 100 parties who joined and who actively shared their schedule portfolio with us in various ways. So
Hmm.
you might be able to imagine that some of them are able to connect via EDI or API or file transfer or whatever. But there's also like smaller, very niche operating inland parties that aren't technically or financially capable of doing so. So for them, we also had to come up with a way of, okay, how can we still let them participate and be found in the same way as anyone else? So we developed a proprietary schedule manager solution for that, and facilitating them in participating in the same way as all the other operators.
Okay. I think
Yeah.
it's a very important piece here that we need to emphasize because
Mm.
the finding the routings between like port to port from Shanghai to Rotterdam is one thing.
Mhm.
Then you have a couple of options basically.
Yep.
But when you think
Yep.
about, I don't know, Nanjing to, I don't know, Essen, then it is completely different story, right? It's like, you
Yeah,
have all of a sudden you have Hamburg, you have Rotterdam, you have Antwerp, then you have different rail connections, this inland that you've just mentioned, but we need to emphasize because that's the biggest piece, I believe, on actually getting all of those puzzles all together. Because at the end of the day, someone is looking, that the problem is to find the connection between uh, place A to place B, not port
yeah,
A to port B.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. The container never sort of emerges in a port and sort of ends in a port. It's
Yeah.
like a port is just a node in the network, right? So it's a node on a trade lane, and um, that's one of the well, I think one of the hardest thing to do is, get all that inland data together in one place, finding them and bringing it into a platform, and then also making sure that you have the logic added to that to combine it together with those C legs, of course, because it's end to end. So it's all those segments combined lead to an optimal route.
Yeah.
And that's also a very interesting one because what's optimal, right? So it's never the same. It's always a combination of factors. Currently, we are focusing a lot on emission and lead time. We are looking into also taking in costs and reliability going forward, but we've initially focused really on the lead time and emission part, also because of the sort of the intrinsic wish to move forward on the sustainability aspect, and bringing insight into what is the result of making a switch from a diesel truck to a electric locomotive, for example, on
Mhm.
your end-to-end journey. So that transparency and insights we really want to facilitate. Um, and the inland part is a huge aspect of that, for sure. Yeah.
All right, I think Kevin, it's time to actually jump into the demo because it's something that I've already seen, and I remember this map that you've shown me at the very beginning some time ago, and then the density of this inland connections is just impressive in my opinion. So yeah, let's maybe jump into that. I think our audience is curious about it too.
Sure. Let me just go ahead and share my screen. Yeah. Let me just put you on the other screen so I can still see you. Here we go. Um, yeah. So the root scanner application itself, as mentioned, it has a core functionality, which is searching your route from A to B. It can be anywhere
Hmm.
in the world. So let's say I want to go from Munich and I want to go to Chicago. There are multiple elements that are relevant, but also, of course, we are looking into um, the well the different solutions that are in between when combining all those schedule options,
Hmm.
right? So here we see, well, as you mentioned, well, there's of course multiple connections that are feasible.
Yeah,
Um,
even
there's
within the same port, right? It's like Antwerp now that we are looking at, and
Yeah,
there are two
yeah,
and
but
more.
there's solutions via Hamburg as well,
Yeah.
with different inland operators connecting the different ports. Um, and what we've done now is we've said, okay, let's focus on the lowest CO2 emission value end to end, right? So we
Hmm.
can go into this specific one and we can see the individual emissions being built up of these individual segments. And of course, we also know all the information on the schedules, right? So who is the operating party? What's the service code? What's the frequency? All those kinds of things. So we pull in about 2.5 million schedules per day from 245 participating carriers and operators.
That's huge
Um,
number.
and well, they are processed, validated, verified, and then we end up with around 1.2 million unique segments, because there's of course also some co-sharing happening between operators, and that's what you see here as a sort of core functionality of Root Scanner. And what we've seen over the years, and this is something that we've specifically been working on over the last year, is that we are used in different segments of operations. So sometimes it's in operation. Someone just needs to move one box from somewhere to somewhere else. Sometimes it's for strategic network planning. Sometimes it's for sustainability, emission reporting, different use cases. But one of the big topics that we are focusing on at the moment is, first of all, bringing insights to cargo owners or forwarders who are acting on behalf of a cargo owner in what is their current situation, right? So we allow them to share with us their entire trade lane portfolio, which you see here. So this is our demo environment, so it's just fake data, but you can sort of understand what we do. So each row here is a trade lane which I can open and move into, right? So this is a trade lane from Warsaw to Manchester. The projected shipments is like 140-foot container, so 200 TEU, with a weight. And what you will see is total projected emissions for that period of time, which is built up by the description of the journey, right? So in this case, it's from Warsaw to Katowice in Poland with a diesel truck. Then there's a transfer at the terminal. There's then an electric train going from there to Moerdijk, operated by Schavenmaker. And then there's a transfer at that terminal. And then there's a short sea vessel going to Immingham from then, where there's a HVO truck. So as you can see, the different fuels are also being taken into account. And what we can then do by having like these hundreds or thousands of trade lanes, all of which are calculated as the benchmark value for that trade lane, we can provide an overview on your current as-is situation, right? So we have a distribution of your emissions within your portfolio, which you can also, investigate, like, okay, which trade lane is this? How much TEU? What's the average ton per TEU value? What's the average value per kilometer? Because that's a very interesting factor, because that's the emission intensity, right? So
from this bubble graph, you can just decide that the biggest red one is your focus at the early days.
Exactly, because there's a big green one, which is a very high in emissions, but that doesn't mean that the trade lane is designed poorly when it comes to sustainability. It can be just a trade lane with a high volume, or just a very long trade lane, and therefore it's high in emissions. But the red one has a very high emission per TEU per kilometer, which means that there's a lot of room for potential optimization.
Yeah, I remember a lot of good, similar discussions, like, and the counterintuitive conclusions sometimes as well, that how can we grow the company if we are forced to decrease the emission? And it's like, if we basically export or ship more, then the emission is going to be bigger. Yes, obviously it will be, but the question is if it's still optimal or not.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, reducing your emission intensity can be done in multiple ways. I mean, you can work with different fuels, and buy other types of equipment or use other types of equipment. Or you can also, what we are focusing on here, look at what are potential alternatives routing wise. It's just making a conscious decision on how your trade lane is designed, which ports of lading, which ports of discharge are you using, which modality for which section, those kinds of things. Those are what we are really focusing on. And as you've seen the very simple door-to-door optimization. Well, it looks simple, but in the background, it's a bit more complex. But
No, come on. When I look at it, it's scary what is in the background. But
yeah.
but at the
No,
same
but
time, I think it's super powerful. It's like even if you see this red bubble, right? It's like and it's
mm,
big, and then you just can dig into that, and you realize that okay, it's red, it's big, but it is something that we actually cannot change because of,
yeah,
I don't know, faster lead time to the market, and if we increase the transit time, then we might lose the business. Then that's the place to actually apply some kind of an
exactly.
offsets to that as well, right? It's just to
Yeah,
on the sustainable goals of each company.
yeah, definitely. So and what we add upon this portfolio is that as we have our optimization solution, we also run a daily optimization on each individual trade lane, right? So we every day we run for each of these trade lane our door-to-door optimization, because it could be that we onboard a new operator, or an
Yeah,
existing operator adds a new service to their portfolio, which might be perfect for one or two of your trade lanes. So
yeah.
you'll be notified right away instead of continuously having to look into this.
And we all
And
know
once,
there's a ton of changes every day, everywhere.
yeah, exactly. And so once you've set out, like, okay, this is the one, like the example we just saw, Warsaw to Manchester, like, okay, this is the one I really want to focus on. I want to look into this. Can I optimize within my bounds, right? So you already mentioned there are, of course, restrictions. So this is our optimizer. This is our most comprehensive tool that we have at the moment. And what it does is it finds all the potential solutions between the two locations, presents them in our optimizer environment, and then allows the user to interact with it to fully set it to their own context and their own preferences.
Yeah.
So as you can see, it's adding solutions to the environment. And what you see, the dotted line on the map, that's the benchmark, right? So the benchmark that I just explained was the truck to Kativoslaski, then the rail
Hmm.
connection to Moerdijk, the sea connection to Immingham, and then the trucking connection to Manchester, which has a reference in lead time, in emissions, and following that, we can then say, well, okay, what is the fastest result that we have in our system, which is like 2.5 days, and what's the lowest emission value? Well, that's the 375 kilogram CO2 equivalent value. So I can go ahead and explore them based sort on emissions or lead time, but I can also look into a balanced optimization. So not just taking in lead time, not just taking emissions, but taking in multiple criteria and having a multifactorial optimization in which I can also control it. So I can say, well, lead time is now a bit more important, or well, emissions are slightly more important at this moment in time.
Nice.
Or as you said, like, well, I want to set a limit, like, it's all fun and games, but it may never exceed 8 days lead time. That's my cap.
Hmm.
Or I don't want the emissions to exceed a certain value. Or I only want direct sea connections being used, so no transfer between sea legs, for example.
Yeah.
Or, well, I want to exclude a certain modality, or I have a preference for a certain operator, or maybe I have a list of operators that I am allowed to work with because it's of the company policy,
Yeah.
um, or excluding of operators. The same goes with locations, right? So let's say I want to go via either Gdansk or Gdynia. What are my options if I use at least one of those ports?
Hmm.
Um, and well, the same goes for excluding, of course, if you want to avoid certain locations because of, well, whatever reason you may have. And trucking as well, right? So the first mile truck distance, last mile, if you want to set some limits on that, that's all possible. So within that, we really want to facilitate your optimum, right? So the, the, based on your context on that specific trade lane, that might be very focusing on emissions, where in another trade lane there's a very time sensitive commodity, and lead time is more important. So you really want to focus on that, but still it may not exceed a certain threshold value. So those kinds of things, and that process is what we really aim to facilitate, really with the aim of reducing waste, right? So that's our sort of like our drive. We want to remove as much waste from your trade lane portfolio as possible, whether that may be unnecessary lead time, unnecessary emissions, risk, all those things. We want to focus on helping you find your optimum. So in that sense, it's really a decision support system to help you in finding your best optimum. And well, you see it here as as our software environment on our platform, but we also offer quite some of this functionality as a API as well. But what we see here a lot is because it's also quite new to a lot of users, making it very visible and very tangible makes it easy to grasp what's actually going on before moving forward and starting implementing things. So yeah, therefore the visual component has always been quite important for us as well in the user experience.
Yeah, it is unbelievable. The journey that I remember the root scanner from 2021. I think from the very very early, and I loved it straight from the very beginning because it's always been a problem to actually find the good routing. But back in the days, it was like a routing between the carriers. There was no inland. It's like it wasn't complementary even at the routing and lead time piece. But today, it's just mind blowing. And if you add this CO2 emissions, it's an extra layer. Probably the last layer is pricing. Of actually, what was the cost associated to that? In similar, let's say, levels, like both spent that I have today, and what would be the gain or extra spend if you change something into more sustainable solutions. But I guess it will come.
Yeah, no, I mean, that is definitely one of the elements that we are looking into for the coming time. But also there, I mean, it's always a tricky one to include because there's no such thing as the price, right? So
Yeah,
everyone has its own price for each individual segment, and then usually
it
multiple
is
prices
huge.
for that
Yeah,
segment as
it's
well. So, and then trying to, really optimize on the full scale. That is something that we're trying to work out at the moment. So we're running some initial implementations, some initial pilots on that. But yeah, it's not an easy one because one of the things that we have been having as a principle from the first start is everything we do needs to work at full scale, right? So if we do emission calculations, everything needs to be calculated in.
otherwise it doesn't make sense. Yeah,
Otherwise, we can't optimize, right? So
yeah.
um, sometimes we have to sort of do a concession in a way that we say, okay, we know we can get some more detail, but it's only for a very low part of the solution space.
Yeah.
So we can't move forward with that.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah,
It's
sometimes that's hard. I want to provide as much detail as possible in the end, but sometimes you have to sort of say, well, if we can't do it full scale, then yeah, we shouldn't do it right now.
no, what you've already accomplished was massive, and if you add like the pricing and the rates and all of the different contracts and like spot deals and I think dynamic pricing, which is also coming to some extent, and it will come
Mm.
further, obviously, same as you have it within the airlines and seats, that if you buy late, you need to pay extra.
Yeah.
So then, it's just the amount of work that you already have in here, like multiplied, you don't know how many times, because it's the same, but at a different price. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
it is absolutely scary, this piece. But so far, Kevin, if you could just say what were the biggest challenges that you were facing actually building it to this phase that you have today, and how you
Um,
overcome it.
yeah, yeah. So I think one, as I mentioned earlier, right? So one of the big challenges was getting the population on the platform, right? So getting the
So this
initial,
chicken and egg problem.
exactly. That was one of the biggest challenges that we had. Especially in the beginning. I mean, onboarding one of the first barge operators, I think it took us like 4 months, getting them on,
Mm,
trying to convince them, getting them, having a look at their schedules. How is this structured? How can we get this working? Those kinds of, really looking into that. So that was quite intensive. And that was, maybe like 10 lines or so, right? So it was a lot of work for not quite a lot of, schedule
yeah.
coverage. But, that was also part of the learning, but also because we had no reference of others already joining. Also in the convincing, it took some effort, right? So, and I think, yeah, that was definitely a very big challenge.
Mm.
Later on,
And how did you overcome it? Because the barge for
yeah,
them, it wasn't like anything valuable in actually engaging into that, but because
yeah,
there was
yeah,
almost nothing existing, right? It's like,
yeah. No, no, definitely, definitely. So it really was in sharing with them the greater vision on a end state in which
mm,
cargo owners and forwarders who are trying to find routes, or finding optimization potential um, in a neutral environment in which it would benefit them being present, because on those routes in which you are the best solution, if you're not in the system, we can't show you, right? So
yeah, you won't win it.
for them, it's really sort of also a belief in the value of the transparency and the availability of that information in a neutral environment that uh, convince them of, hey, this might actually work and provide me new leads, right? So it's also for them, it's like being visible. It's publicity. It's generating potential leads for them. Um, so that's really the value for them. We also, I mean, they are visible on the platform for free. They are included for free in change for their, keeping their schedules up to date.
Yeah.
Um, so also for them, it's like it's not that it's a big cost for them. It's just like
Yeah,
a
there is some task associated,
effort.
but depending on your structure, then you can either use this tool that you've created actually specially for them nowadays, or
Yeah,
just upload your schedules or connect to the EDI and API. So
exactly,
there's a
exactly.
wide pool of
Yeah,
options actually. You can automate
yeah,
it,
yeah.
basically, if you are in a well positioned for that.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So that was the biggest challenge at the start, and I mean later on we of course also run into uh, the technical scale sort of pain points where in the beginning you're like, yeah, we're gonna do this and it will work for a while, but we know that at some point we need to revise this because yeah, it won't scale. So during the last years we've revised multiple elements of the core of our solution and rebuild them from the ground up with new insights to make it better and to also allow for it to scale much more easy and cheap. Um,
Hmm.
so those are things that you, of course, accept in the beginning and then sort of see it as a problem for future us. Let's let future us solve that. Let's just see if we get there first. I hope we
Yeah.
run into those problems because that means
Yeah.
that we're doing well,
That's
right? So
yeah, that's
yeah,
very often.
yeah, exactly. So
And it's a good
I
way of
mean,
thinking on that.
yeah. And I think one of the things that I have been growing a fan of over those period is, one of my colleagues, Chris, he always said, okay, first you need to just build it, make it work, then we'll make it better, and then we'll make it pretty. But get it up
Yeah,
and running and start using it. And then we'll learn and we'll see that we're doing it wrong and didn't waste time on making it pretty at the beginning. So
that's ultimately the
that
only
is,
way forward with such a tools.
yeah. So that's, well, g- wherever that's applicable, we apply it. Of course, some things they just require a well thought out plan because they're just big infrastructural changes. But with new functionalities, we first try and see if we can get the core principle working.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Did you engage the users from those barge operators into this process that they told you it's difficult for us to actually upload the schedules and based on that you've started building these tools for them or
Yeah, yeah. So at that time, we started out with okay, we have our routing engine, which is functioning as it should. We have our website. We have some data sources that we have now, but we want to connect to the primary data source, right? So to the inland operator. So that was a decision that we made, like, okay, we want to work directly with the data owner, the primary data owner. So how can we make it as easy as possible for them to participate? So lower the bar of entry as much as possible. So
hmm
uh, that's when we came up with, okay, we need to make it very easy for them to join, basically to start. So make it easy for them to start, make it simple, guide them as much as possible, and also, go and sit next to them and explain and see what's not working or what's not so intuitive, and then learn and adapt and iterate, basically.
mm.
Yeah,
Kevin, I think last question from my side for today.
yeah,
It's where are you heading? Where do you see Root Scanner in 5, 10 years time, whatever the horizon is?
yeah. Our big ambition there would be to be leveraged by basically anyone who is moving a container from somewhere to somewhere else, or who is responsible for maintaining a portfolio of trade lanes, and is responsible for lowering their emission footprint, or grow. The aim there is really to have impact on that. So to really focus on providing whatever needs to be done to generate that impact. And I envision that means that we are doing two things. So one is, really leveraging the environment that we have today with additional parameters such as cost and more reliability insights and much more controls even, as well as integrating directly with, TMSs, other
Hmm.
partners, solution providers, to really enhance the impact as much as possible and really drive down as much waste as we can in the container logistics industry, because there's still a lot to gain. I mean, we did a case study recently on 8,000 containers shipped from the Byron region in Germany to the US. And we saw that we had a median emission reduction of 39%. 39, two double digits. I mean, there's
Yeah.
still so much to gain. So I
Yeah.
definitely see there's a big uh, applicability for our solution. And yeah, just
I'm glad to see this visibility that you are bringing because it's going to also make, generate the pressure actually on the carriers to focus on that. Because at the end,
yeah.
if it's visible to the BCOs and they start taking the decisions with this factor in mind as well, then,
Mm.
it's going to play a bigger role in the future. And
Yeah.
probably at the end, the spread is going to be much lower. So maybe not two digits, like single digits, like within these
Hmm.
nuances. But I think the ultimate goal
Yeah.
of everyone who's advocating for the sustainability is exactly that.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. No, I
Yeah,
mean that's the in the end that's the goal, right?
yeah,
In that situation, there will still be new, parties setting up warehouses or factories, and like, okay, how are we gonna ship our goods here or
yeah.
from here, right? So there will always be new connections popping up,
Oh,
searching for insight.
this piece is massive. It's like maintaining even those, and I'm pretty sure that within the globe you would find some locations that you think there's a lot of things to be done in terms of actually growing your reach and getting this inland on board.
Mm.
Plus there's the trucking itself, which is not like a same trucking. There's also some euro in Europe associated to that and the emission class of the truck itself. Plus electric trucks in the future, and
Yeah,
and then you
alternative
go how
fuels.
those
Yep.
are charged. It's endless.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, there's a big difference between countries there. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. All right, Kevin, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much for bringing it. I would
Yeah, thanks
encourage
for having me.
everyone. It's like doesn't really matter if you are the BCO or the freight forwarder or the inland carrier. I think it's really super interesting for you to get more in details with the root scanner. So if anybody needs an intro, I'm happy to do so. So you can reach me or Kevin directly or root scanner through the website. So
Yeah.
it is the rootscanner.com, as you can see on the screen right now. And
Yeah.
yeah, thank you, Kevin.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.